So the first question was, how do you iterate over the properties of an object? So here I have taken an object which has four properties, and one property is also an object which has more properties and values. So first way to iterate over an object to display its values of the properties. So first we display the property and we display the value of that property. So this way is good enough. We just make a for loop and iterate for I in object. So every property is displayed and then its values also displayed. So that is fine for a simple object, but if we have an object nested inside an object, we can use recursion so that we display all the values of the objects nested object also. So here I have made a function property traversal, so we can make a loop for every property in object if the value of the property is also an object, then we call this function again. And to make this is object function, I have created another function. If a triple is equal to null, then return false, and return if this is an object. So if this comes out to be an object, it will call this function again. And why I've put this condition, because sometimes the property is null, and null is also an object in JavaScript. If you type of null, so it will also be an object, so we don't have to consider that. So that's why. And when we run this, it will also print doing fine with its property names. So that's it. Let me show you by running it. So node Posist nested object. So if we run this, the first loop prints the properties of the object also, which is this, and the second loop also prints the nested objects inside this object. So that's it. Moving on to next question. So the next question is HTTP status code 200 and 500 and 400 means. So basically HTTP's status code 200 means that the request is okay and the request has succeeded, and there will be a valid response for it. And the 400 request is actually a bad request. Basically the request made has some error in it, uh, some error while calling that API, or message has some error. And 500 code error is like the generic catch-all error. Basically it catches every error uh, that cannot be associated any other error code. So for the next question, that is what is two-way binding, I have taken a template from the net. Actually I am not experienced in Angular, but I have more stack development experience. But I could understand it after googling about it. So basically, two-way binding is a way to keep the input and the value in the let's say class, or basically a property inside this um, class, TypeScript class, or template, because it is a component, and in its template there is a value. We have to change the value. We have to take an input from the user, and then it changes the value when we press enter. We have to add an event listener to this input, and then it changes the value. And if we want to uh, change the uh, this is called event binding, and Property binding means that the the value that is stored in the template gets displayed out correctly, and so that is called property binding. uh, these are all Angular concepts. So so ng model is a directive. So directives are basically class which change the properties of a component, and by using this we can achieve something called two-way binding, which incorporates the both the property binding and event binding, uh, and it does that so that they are always in sync. So if I change the input here, it changes instantly without even pressing enter. So that is done by two-way binding, which is provided by Angular. And here we to the input element, HTML element, we do this add this ng model directive, and to that we add uh, brackets and square brackets, uh, and we assign that it the property we want to uh, two-way bind or keep in sync mainly, and uh, just by doing that we have added event binding and property binding both. So basically it's like the data stays in sync what the user enters, and it's in the app, and what the the data in app and what is displayed outside, that stays in sync with just this small amount of code. Yeah, so that's what I understood in an hour of this. So the next question is, how is map different from filter in JavaScript? So also for that also I have written a code, small code. So basically map is returns a new array with when which applies a function to the array, every element in the array. So if we look here and if we clear this, and if we run this, this will this is basically a function, math dot square root function, which it will apply to every element in the A array. So if we run this, mm, so you can see first we have console log b, and this actually applies that function to every element on that array, and the filter method of array does a filtering based on a condition, and it actually it returns an array with the same length or a lesser length, whereas in map it returns the same length of the array, but it can reduce length because it chooses the elements uh, that satisfy a certain criteria. So basically a dot filter will return an array which satisfies this criteria, where the element e is greater than 25. So C would be all the numbers in A that are greater than 25, which is the case. We can see here 30, 40 and 60 are greater than 25, whereas 25 and 20 are not. So strictly greater than 25. 25 is not strictly greater than 25. So that's it.